And now I'd like to introduce, it gives me a great honor to introduce, I believe, a famous man in Edmonton. At least he told me he was. The morning man from oops, I almost goofed there. How about CHED 630 Ched? I would like to present to you right now our guest speaker, Mr. Bruce Bowie.
Thank you, Mr. Andruski. Graduates, don't they look good? What a good-looking group. And moms and dads, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, let's give them a hand. I really appreciate this opportunity to come out to Holden to speak to the graduates tonight and to you. I am from a small town myself, so it's really nice to get out and, I think meet some of my kind of people. And I met them here tonight. Mr. Shakor, a very hospitable host, before I came, he told me to be sure to come to his place before, and we'd have some refreshments before we go to the banquet. And I got over there and I had a chance to meet all the teachers. And you know, there was a bit of a tragedy. We almost didn't make it to the banquet. An unfortunate thing, Mr. Shakor was putting his teeth in and he got his face caught in the glass. But we got him free, got him to the banquet, had a great meal. Boy, those ladies from the Well of the Order of Purple can cook. It was fantastic. And here we are. I should tell you a little bit about myself and the town I come from. Gee, I thought I was passing through town when I went through Pole on the way out here. It's about the same size as my hometown. It's Piapot, Saskatchewan, is where I was born and raised. There really is such a place. Yeah, it's called that sometimes. It's called a lot of other things too, but that's one of the names. It was founded by Chief Piapot, or Peapot, whatever you choose. Back around the turn of the century, he was trying to find a suitable place for his horse to die. And he picked up Piapot. It seemed like a good spot, and it hasn't changed too much since then. It's the gopher suicide capital of Saskatchewan. They come up out of their holes and they take one look around and head for the highway. But seriously, I had a good time growing up there. I really had a lot of fun. Trapping gophers was one of the big things we did, and other things we did for excitement were putting pennies on the railroad track and watching the train flatten them. And it doesn't sound like much, but it was a good time while I was growing up there. And I don't know how I wound up in Edmonton, just through a series of events. I wound up there, but I still feel real good about coming to places like Holden and getting a chance to meet you. It was interesting thinking about my graduation tonight, you know, and seeing these graduates here tonight. I was not real fond of school. It seemed like a real long 12 years to me, and it probably did for some of you too. But I'll tell you something, after you get out, it's amazing how quickly the next 12 go. I knew how old I was getting when I noticed that the mayor looks younger than I do. The mayor of Holden. You've got a pretty sharp mirror there. I ran for mayor of Piapot one time. There weren't that many people in our hometown, as I mentioned earlier. And I guess I didn't quite have enough charisma. I was just barely edged out by a Massey 44 tractor. I think that's when I left town. I don't remember. But anyhow, at the banquet tonight, it was interesting listening to Mr. Keller. He gave the address from the parents, and he mentioned about thinking of them as grown-ups now and adults. And I remember what that was like for me in grade 12. Just all of a sudden, overnight after I graduated, I'd ask my dad about things. I'd say, well, what do you think about this? What do you think I should do about that? And he'd say, what do you think? I said, what do you think I should think? I just couldn't get used to him wondering what I should think. And he was a great help to me. And he's a very quiet man. I'd call, it's still the same thing. Not exactly the same, but I'd call home just after I left home. I moved to Calgary the first year. And I'd talk to my mom, and she'd fill me in on all the latest gossip. And then I'd get my dad on the phone, and I'd say, hi, Dad, how are you? Good. How are you? Fine. You need money? No, I don't need money. Okay, see you later. And that was about it. The only time that he would really have a lot to say was if he'd get really upset with us, which wasn't too often, but every once in a while we'd kind of push his patience, and he'd blow his stack. In our house, we had a hallway that went down by the kitchen, another one that went up around the bedrooms, and it made a perfect oval for my brother and I to get into Kentucky Derby races every once in a while. And I remember one particular Sunday we came home from church, and he was sitting down trying to enjoy his Sunday paper, and we were running around the hallways, and my mom had just waxed the floor, and I blew a sock or something. I don't know what happened, but I was going around one corner, and I put my shoulder through the window in the door, and didn't get hurt. I just broke the window. and this big crash, and the next thing I knew was a bigger crash, my dad stomping down the hallway. And he never said too much, but he opened up his mouth and let out a beller. And my brother and I just stood there and shook. We thought the world was coming to an end for about 1 second. And honest to goodness truth, about 1 second later, I wet my pants. I just couldn't believe it. I thought for sure we were dead. I thought he was going to kill us. But we survived, and the window got replaced. But anyhow, it is really nice. I don't feel that I'm all that well prepared to tell you about success. I don't feel that I've arrived yet, but I thought I'd share a few stories with you. There are several of us at the station who get a chance to speak at grads quite often. And Bob Layton has collected several stories over the years that he passed a few along to me that I thought were pretty good stories, success stories. And they kind of give an outlook on what the best is yet to come is all about, and how this can happen through a different set of circumstances. The first one is about a young man who was from a small town called Jackson, Michigan. And this young fella really wanted to be a wrestler. He loved wrestling. He was on the high school wrestling team, and he really did well. He was a tremendous wrestler. And this was his goal when he got out. He'd watch all the wrestlers on TV, and he noticed that one trademark that they had was a cauliflower ear. And so, I don't know if you call it dedication or stupidity, he put Vaseline on his ear and he pounded his ear in front of the mirror for a few hours every day to try and get that ear down. This is how badly he wanted to be a wrestler. One other thing he enjoyed just about as much was going to the movies for matinees on Saturday. And one particular Saturday, he was headed out to the movies with his money, and he went by this one intersection in downtown Jackson, and he noticed a bunch of people gathered on a corner, so he thought he'd go see what it was all about. And it turned out that there was a man from a radio station there doing kind of a man-on-the-street interview, asking about what he thought about taxes being raised or something. He couldn't remember what it was all about afterwards. But anyhow, somehow the mic came around to him, and he opened up his mouth, and words just started to come out until I almost had to wrestle the mic away from him. He just loved this idea of talking in front of this microphone. And he went on and on and on. And after the mic was wrestled away from him, he never did get to the movies that afternoon. He wandered around the streets thinking about how much he liked that and how exciting it would be to be able to be on the radio and be a radio announcer. And an interesting thing happened. He went back home and he couldn't get it out of his mind. And a couple of weeks later, the radio station called him up and they said they had received a flood of letters from people who wondered who this young man was that they had on the radio, this well-spoken young man, and would he be interested in coming and working at the station. So he went and started to work part-time. He worked weekends. He was still going to school then. And after he finished school, he worked full-time. And he worked his way up, did very well for himself. He got into television. And as a matter of fact, he went on to become the father of talk show television. His name was Jack Paar. And he was the man who founded The Tonight Show before Johnny Carson took over. And if it hadn't been for that chance meeting on that corner in Jackson, Michigan, he might have had his head knocked off in a wrestling ring somewhere. We'd never heard of him or anything like that. But it wasn't until several years later, incidentally, that Jack told the truth about all those letters they received at the station. That flood of letters were actually written by Jack and his mom. But it got him the job. The second story is about somebody, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of William Smart. Bill Smart. This one goes back quite a few years. And he was from a little place called Jennyland, Arkansas. And Bill had a little farm down there, and this was many years ago. This is when the Civil War broke out in the U.S., so he had to leave his farm and go to war, and he managed to survive that. A lot of men died in that war, but he survived it. And he went back to Jennyland, Arkansas, met the girl of his dreams, he got married, and they settled down and had a couple of children. And there was also a coal mine in Jennyland that they kind of co-opted, all the farmers co-opted with. And so he made his living on this small farm and out of this coal mine. And after a period of time, things got a little tough, and the coal mine didn't produce like it used to, and they wound up in pretty dire straits financially. And so Bill Smart had heard about the Pacific Northwest. He heard about this beautiful area of great farmland and huge timbers and up in Washington State. And he thought, what a wonderful place to go and homestead and raise my family. And so he pulled up stakes and left the coal mine and everything behind, and he went to Washington State to pursue this dream. And things went very well for him. He got a little farm there, and it grew bigger, and so did his family. He had 4 more children. They had 6 children by this time, and he was starting to prosper. Things were starting to go very well until one particular winter when some tragedy struck. His wife, first of all, came down with a little cold that got worse, and it turned into pneumonia, and she got very sick. And, of course, they didn't have the medicine that we have now or the practice that we have, and they tried to do all they could for her, but unfortunately she passed away. And so Bill was left with a kind of a real struggle in his life. First of all, he had this farm that he really loved and this thing that he worked so hard for, but he had these 6 kids, and he realized that farming is a 24-hour-a-day job, and he couldn't devote his time to raising the kids and running the farm. So he decided what he would do is go to Spokane, he'd sell the farm, go to Spokane, get a 9-to-5 job, and he'd have time for his kids. And so he did that. And he kind of gave up his dream to make sure that his kids got the proper upbringing. And the wonderful thing is all his kids turned out great. And one of his children, his oldest daughter, decided that he should get some recognition for this. So one day she went to her pastor at her church in Spokane. And she said, what do you think if on this one particular Sunday we ring the bells in church just to kind of honor my dad and just to make it kind of a special day for him? And the pastor thought that'd be a good idea because he'd made quite a sacrifice. And so they did. And even though you may not have heard of Bill Smarts, you know, we still remember his birthday today, the second Sunday in June, Father's Day, when fathers everywhere are honored. You know, he made quite a sacrifice in his life. He gave up what he wanted so his children could have a proper upbringing. So maybe by some people's standards, worldly standards, he may not have been a success because his farm didn't grow and prosper, but he was a tremendous success as far as his family is concerned, and Father's Day testifies to that fact today, even now after he's long gone. And our third story, the final story I have for you this evening, is about another young fella who became successful. You know, it's a wonderful thing when you first graduate, you go out and you really want to beat the world and you want to just really get out there and tie into it. And it's a great thing if you never lose that. That's really one of the biggest secrets, if you can hang on to that feeling. And this is a young guy who had that feeling, but this was back in the 30s when things were considerably tougher than they are now. And this was a time when people were riding the rails in the boxcars and going from town to town trying to find work. And this is what this young guy was doing. So he pulled into a small Midwest U.S. town along with everybody else. They piled out of the boxcars. It was the same scene it had been in many other towns. He went to the soup kitchen first of all to get something warm to eat. And from there he went on and decided to go try some of the factories and plants and see if he could get in the lineups and find a job somewhere. And as he was walking down the street, he hadn't had a job in so long, and he was getting hungry. This soup kitchen business wasn't exactly providing all his needs. He saw a man walking along who was dressed in a 3-piece suit and looked quite well-to-do, and he thought, surely this guy owns some kind of a company or something, or he might have a line on a job for me. So he walked up to him and asked him, and this fellow said, well, you know, I do have a company. But he said, we've got full staff right now and lots of people waiting for jobs. He said, I don't see any openings. The only possible way I could see an opening if I could find someone who had that something special. And so this young guy said, well, what is that something special? He said, I don't know, I can't explain it, but some people seem to have it. When things get tough, they just seem to be able to rise to the top and continue to prosper and do really well. And he said, well, I'm able to even find a job. I don't think I would be that person you're looking for. He said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you my card, and if you ever discover what that is, give me a call. So he took his card and he wandered on down the street. And as he went a little farther, he noticed a young fella dragging along a keg of nails, about a 75-pound keg of nails, and this guy was about 11 years old, having quite a struggle with it. So he thought, well, I'll give him a hand. And so he carried it to him to a factory where they were making wooden boxes. So they walked past the big lineup of men who were waiting to fill out the application forms for a job and took them into the compound at the back and dropped them off. And when he went into the compound at the back, he noticed that all these guys were doing, they had a pile of slats and a pile of nails and a hammer, and they were pounding these wooden boxes together. He thought, I can do that. He noticed a broken hammer sitting down on the ground, so he picked it up and decided he'd just pound a few boxes together to kill some time. And the foreman came over, and he said, what's your work number? And he said, well, I don't have one. I just walked in with this guy. And he said, go get yourself a good hammer and go over to the office and get yourself a work number. He had his job. He had his first job. So he sat there and pounded boxes together for quite a while, and he kind of settled down and started to prosper a little bit. He loved to read. He'd go to the library and read every night, read all kinds of books from the classics to the scriptures. He just loved to read. And he self-improved himself in that way. He became better educated. Started to take some night classes. He took a night class in accounting. And while all this was going on, he also met a young lady and got married, and they wound up getting their own home. And he graduated from this night class in accounting, and one day he went to work and he had this accounting certificate, and it just happened that it was payroll day, and the accountant was sick on that particular day, so somebody remembered that he had this certificate, so they said to the boss, why don't you get him to do the payroll today? So he did. They asked him to come to the front office, and he got it all together, and everything balanced, did a great job. And so they were quite impressed, so he went back out in the compound, started making boxes again, and pretty soon word got around that this guy knew about accounting, he knew how to put the boxes together, great material for a foreman. He knows how things operate in the head office, and he knows how things operate out in the compound. So he wound up becoming a foreman, and he worked his way up in the company until gradually he just was vice president, right below the president. He did very, very well for himself. And he did this in a fairly short period of time. And so one day the president said, listen, I don't know how you did it, how you managed to be so successful and do what you did, but I was wondering if I gathered all the men from management for a special meeting, would you tell them what some of your secrets are, what you've done to come this far? He said, sure, I'd be happy to do that, if I can come up with something I can share with them. And so he went home and he thought of it. Suddenly he remembered, something clicked in his mind. He remembered that fellow that he'd met on the street when he first came into town who asked him about that something special. So he thought, well, I'll call him up and invite him to the meeting too. And so he did. He invited him to come along to the meeting. And he got up before those men. And he said that he thought he had found something special just after he went to the library and started reading. He said one day he picked up the Bible and he opened it up to the book of Genesis. And it said, God made man in his own image. And he said, you know, I started looking around myself and seeing the trees and the flowers and how beautiful things are around me. And I thought, what tremendous creativity and what artwork. And if I'm made in that image, surely I've got a spark of creativity in me, and I've got something in me that I can go out and I can succeed and I can do as well. And so he kind of worked on that. And from that just small little spark, it started the fire that helped him climb to the top. And that fellow came up to him afterwards and said, you know, I think you're right. I think you have found that something special. And that's really all it took, that little something to get him going. And I believe there's really something to that. You know, I was at an ADAC youth conference last year, and Susan Natras spoke on the very same subject on success. They'd asked her to speak on that. And she, of course, I'm sure most of you are familiar with her, is a world trap and skeet champion. She got into trap and skeet shooting through her dad, and she became a champion at a time when she was the only woman doing it. And she still travels all over the world doing it. And she said, you know, when she hears people speak on success, she hears them speak about how important mental fitness is to keep your mind active. It's very true. And how important physical fitness is to keep yourself in good shape, healthy mind, healthy body, and or vice versa. And she said that's very true. And she said, but nobody speaks on spiritual fitness. And I think she's right too. I think that's important also. Reverend Brown kind of touched on that in his prayer. You know, there's a verse in Proverbs that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will guide your ways. And if I can leave you with one piece of advice, I think that that's one that's helped me a lot. And I hope it'll help you too. And I'll tell you what, hearing him speak tonight and seeing this group of graduates, I'm sure that no matter what comes, they'll be a success. I wish you all the very